everyone, welcome back to Kidding Around. My name is Melanie Smith and I am so excited that you are here with me today for another Masterpiece Monday. Today we will be talking about the artist Georgia O'Keeffe and her beautiful large flower paintings. Before we do that though, if you like what you're seeing here and want to follow along with all of Kidding Around's videos, please make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and also below each video click the thumbs up. Also, if you really like what you're doing here, please make sure to share us with your friends. Thank you very much. Okay, well let's talk a little bit about Georgia O'Keeffe. Have you heard her name before? She is a very famous artist, so you might have heard of her, but I bet you don't know a lot about her. So let's just talk about a few details. So she was an American artist, and she was born in 1887 in Wisconsin. She was the second of 7 children, and by the age of 10, she knew that she wanted to be an artist. When she was old enough, she went to the Art Institute of Chicago and she graduated in the top of her class. She lived most of her life in 2 different states. One state was New York and the other state was New Mexico. And if you look at her art, you can definitely tell that what she saw out her window influenced her greatly. Her skyscraper paintings are reminiscent of New York, and her landscape paintings are reminiscent of New Mexico. She's also very famous for her flower paintings. I'm going to show you a couple here, and I want you to find the similarities in these. These flowers are very different from each other, but you can see that they are painted in a similar style. She has painted very small details in a very large way. You can see that she is not even concerned with painting the entire flower. She really focuses in on one small part, and then the rest of the flower, if she runs out of room on her canvas, just doesn't get painted. Her style is distinctive, and I am sure now that any time that you see a flower painted this way, you will recognize it as a Georgia O'Keeffe flower. And today you are going to get to try your hand at Georgia O'Keeffe's style, and you are going to paint your very own poppy, just like Georgia O'Keeffe. So here is the picture for our inspiration for our project today. Look at those 2 red poppies. You see the center black parts, and you see the red petals. You can see that they are not completely red. There's some orange, there's some darker red, there's some lighter red, kind of makes a ruffly appearance. And then you can obviously see that as you move out to the edges of the canvas, the flowers just kind of stop because she has not painted the outer edges of the flowers. Don't you, as you look at this picture, kind of feel like you are on the inside of the flower? I think it's a really fun technique, and I think today you are going to enjoy painting in that same style. So you are going to get to paint a Georgia O'Keeffe poppy today, just like the ones we just saw. As you look at this, I want you to notice a couple different things. The first thing is that I want you to notice that this is many, many, many times larger than a real poppy. I want you to notice the black center, and then the red set of petals, and the orange set of petals, and then the red set of petals behind that. I want you also to notice that some of these petals are going off the side of the page, just like Georgia O'Keeffe painted. This is, again, to help your viewer feel like they are on the inside of the flower. Maybe they'll even imagine that they are a little bee flying in for pollen. Okay, so let's talk about the supplies that you will need. You will need a piece of watercolor paper. If you don't have watercolor paper, you can use cardstock. You know, you can probably even use printer paper, though as you're painting it, be aware that it will be pretty easy to tear, so go very lightly. It also may curl up at the end after it's dry. You can always put it under a stack of thick books, and that should flatten it out pretty well. You will also need a set of watercolors. Specifically, the colors that you will need are red, orange, and black. You will need a red and an orange washable marker. Make sure that they're washable. And then you will also need some bleeding tissue paper. This is special tissue paper that you can use in art. When you put water on it, the color transfers out to the paper. It's like it's bleeding. That's why it's called bleeding tissue paper. You will also need some water because we're watercoloring, and some paper towels. Those are always good to have on hand. So let's get started. Before we get started, I should mention that it's important to protect your work surface. So put a piece of paper or plastic or cardboard under the paper that you will be painting on. Remember, we're going to be painting clear up to some of these edges, so we want to make sure that we're okay if we accidentally slip off the side. All right, the first thing that we are going to do is we are going to draw the Georgia O'Keeffe poppy. So I am going to draw the center first. I'm going to use my red washable marker, and I am going to draw that center just by drawing a circle. You'll notice that the center of my flower is not in the center of my paper, and that's because of something known as the rule of thirds. I'm not going to go too in-depth into that, but basically what it breaks down to is that our eyes are drawn to things that are not centered. So we kind of imagine that our paper is folded into thirds. So the one section is here in the middle, and then you have two sections on the outside. And you actually do that on the top and bottom too. So you have a line there and a line there. And what you try to do is put the important parts of your art at the intersections of those lines. You'll also see that my center of my flower is not actually at one of those intersecting points, but it is close. And so I think it's close enough that your eye will be drawn there, and it will make the art more pleasing to the eye. Kind of interesting. Many artists actually do break this rule, so it is not a hard and fast rule, but it's just a general rule to kind of keep in mind. If you want to put yours in the center, you know what? It's your art. You go for it, but mine is going to be off to the side. All right, the next thing that I am going to be doing is drawing the black kind of, they are the center of the flower, but they are on the petals. So I am going to draw those in. All right, just like that. This part, this whole part now that I have drawn is going to be black. The next thing that I am going to do is draw the red petals, those petals that are the closest into the center of the poppy. So I am going to just draw like this, and I want you to notice that I am not using a pencil first. If you really, really feel that it's important that you use a pencil, you can. But I think it's better if you use your marker directly on the paper. I think it's very important for kids to understand that art is not perfect. There is nothing perfect about art. And it's really important to not be so paralyzed by being perfect that you don't just get in there and make some fun art. You may not draw this exactly the way that you imagine it in your mind, but I am sure that it will be beautiful no matter how you draw it. So I urge you very strongly not to draw with pencil first in this case. If you absolutely need to, you can, but I really think that you will be more satisfied with the entire process if you just use your markers directly on the paper. Okay, so once I have my petals drawn, my first set of petals, I am now going to take my orange marker and I am going to draw my second set of petals. So I am going to draw kind of out here, and I want you to see that I am going to start to go off the paper. And that's totally what we want. We want this to be big enough that you are drawing off the paper. So I am going to imagine, I could even draw it. Imagine or draw that petal, and then I'm going to finish it on that side. And I'm going to do that here too. And in fact, I've just decided, you know what, that petal's not going to finish at all. And then I'll take this one and I'll go off and I'll imagine it coming back like right there. Then I am going to take my red and I'm going to finish the flower. So I'm going to draw here and imagine that that goes off there. And then I'll take this and I'll go this way. So this is kind of overlapping the orange. That's great. That's what happens in nature, right? And then I'll do that, and that one's just not even going to complete. I'm just going to imagine that it went off, and it, if it came back in, it would have come back in under this petal, so we won't see the rest of that. Okay, now it's painting time. So I have a paintbrush here that is a little bit different than the paintbrush that comes with the normal kit. You can use the paintbrush that comes with the normal kit, but the one that I am going to use is clearly already full of paint. I didn't dry this out before I closed it, and you can see that that paint got all over that paintbrush. Okay, so you can see that the paintbrush that I am using is angled, and it's a little wider than normal, and it's pretty stiff. This, I have found, is the best brush for me to have some control over what I'm painting. You can try a brush like this, you can try the brush that your kit comes with. It's up to you, but I think it's really important to find, if you're painting, the brush that works for you the best. All right, so now let's go ahead and get some paint on the paper. I'm going to paint the center first. So remember, when you're painting with watercolors, you get the brush wet and then you dip into the paint. Sometimes you'll need to actually even drip some water into the color of paint that you're using. And then I don't need to go back to the water, I'm just going back to the paint because I already have enough water on my brush. If you start going back to the water between every single time that you're on the paper, then you start to get a whole bunch of water on your page, which is not what we want. In fact, you'll see that I'm painting a little bit dry. There, I'm just starting to kind of get to the point that I need some water there, but I don't want a bunch of water on this paper, so I'm keeping the water to a minimum as I paint. That's just because we want this to be able to dry so that we can move on to our next step. So I have painted now all of the black, and you see that I am going over the red. That is totally fine. Because we're using washable markers, these markers are going to bleed a little bit into your painting. That's exactly what we want. You'll see that Georgia O'Keeffe's paintings absolutely had color variation just like that. Okay, so now I have painted the black center of my painting. Now, because I don't want to bump right up against that black with red, I am going to start painting the orange petals. So I'm going to wash my brush out very, very well. I'm scrubbing it on the bottom to make sure that there's no black color on it. And then I'm going to put that wet brush into the orange, and here we go. I'm going to paint. And I'm painting right over that red line. That is totally fine. It's going to bleed a little bit, and that's okay. I want just a little bit more water. So yeah, now I'm going to paint along here, and I'm filling it in. You can do the amount of color on these petals that you want. If you want a little bit more, just make sure to go back to the orange paint just a little bit more than I am. You can see this one's pretty light. The really cool thing about watercolors is that they dry with such texture. So you can see here that everything, every little stroke that you see here, you will see eventually on the paper. And you can see here, right, this is the red petal and the orange petal. I have decided that I'm going to go over that red with orange, and the orange petal is what's going to be kind of laying on top, so we would see more of the orange than the red. You can do it however you want, of course, and I painted over that red line, and you see kind of how it's starting to kind of what should I say? It's flowing out, right? That's okay. We want that. In fact, we're going to go back and add a little bit of color to these parts anyway, so that will work right in. It adds texture, it adds depth. All of these different colors, the fact that these colors are not solid, which is definitely what you get with watercolor, makes your painting, makes your art more interesting. And you can see I'm going pretty quickly because I don't want you to have to wait on me, but you take the amount of time that you want to. All right, I'm just starting to finish the orange, at least my first set of orange. You can see that the red is bleeding out into the orange. That's because my wet paintbrush is hitting the washable marker, so it's doing exactly what I want it to do. All right, now once I have it done to this extent, I am going to take this bleeding tissue paper that I have mentioned to you, and we're going to use some of it. And it's going to make some different colors, some different patches of color on these petals that I have painted. So I am, because I'm painting the orange parts, going to be using some orange, and then I'm also going to be using some red because I want, just like in Georgia O'Keeffe's original painting, some of that orange and red to flow together. So I have taken 4 little pieces of this bleeding tissue paper, and I have a link below. If you don't have this bleeding tissue paper, which my guess is most people don't, there's a link below. It's not very expensive, and it really adds depth to your painting. So it'd be fun to add it. If you don't have it, ask your parents if they can get some for you. All right, so I am going to place these bleeding pieces of tissue paper on my orange petals. And I'm only doing 1 on each. It's up to you how much you do. I want you to see what this does to the color of the petals as I paint it on. So then you'll have an idea of how you want to use it. So you see I added water, just water. That's all I added to this. And then you can see that the tissue paper is starting to add color. Well then, once I've got the color that I want, I'm going to take that off, and then I'm going to just smush it around just a little bit, and you'll see the way that this changes the color of the petal because of the orange beneath and the red on top and the water and everything. You'll see that it's starting to kind of make a brand new color. And this gives you a texture in a way that just painting on different colors won't. It just mixes the color in a fun way. Now I'm doing the orange down here, and I'm going to lift it up, and then this just becomes trash. Make sure that as you lift that bleeding tissue paper up, when you put it down, make sure that it's on a place that can handle color on it. You don't want to put it directly on your work surface, otherwise your work surface will be colored that color. So I'm just putting it on my paper, my protection paper. All right, so you see I used a dark orange, and you can kind of see how it's flowing in there to the rest of the petal, just kind of making it look a little more realistic. Here I used a lighter orange, and here I used a red. And I'm sure that you can tell the difference in the resulting colors on the petals. But I hope you can also see how it makes it look just a little bit more realistic, because nothing in nature is one solid color. All right, there we go. All right, I'm really liking my poppy so far. Now I am going to go ahead and I'm going to put the red in the center of these petals. You know, actually I've changed my mind. I'm going to go ahead and do this outside red first, because I see that that black still isn't quite dry. And while I don't mind if it mixes a little bit, I don't want to mix a bunch of red in right next to the black, because that will turn brown and muddy and mucky, and I don't want that. But it doesn't hurt at all to mix this orange and red together. They actually go very well together, as you can see. So I'm actually going to paint this outside red first. You can do this if you wanted to, at this point, stop for a few minutes and let it dry. You could, and then you could do this inside red first. That's up to you. You know, sometimes when I'm just a little bit impatient, I take a hairdryer to my painting pieces and dry them with a hairdryer just to speed it up a little. You have to be a little bit careful on that, because if you have any puddles of water, that hairdryer can blow them into places that you don't want. But if you go low and you hold it way back, it really does speed it up a little. But this way we can just use the ordering to help our colors. So you see that I am painting in on the red now, the red petals that go behind the orange petals on the poppy. And some of these go off, which is great. We want it to look just like Georgia O'Keeffe's. So we're going off, and then you can see that as I get close to the orange, I am being somewhat careful not to go clear into the orange, but I am totally okay with taking my water with my paintbrush and going right over my orange line. And you can see how that kind of makes the colors mix there. Here's red down in this bottom. There's not too much red down here. All right. And then I know that I had said that this red petal was going to go behind that orange, but I actually do think I'm going to paint this in as if there were a complete red petal right here behind the orange. Okay, there we go. And you know what? Now I'm going to do the same thing with my bleeding tissue paper. I am going to take another red piece. Actually, let's see, I'll take 2 red pieces, and then I'm going to take an orange piece as well. So I put red on the orange, and now I'm going to put orange on the red. That's just to mix it around just a little bit, to give all of these places just their different patch of color. And I'll put the orange right there, and then, again, just water on the brush, that's all it is. I go over the bleeding tissue paper, and it leaves its color. And I'll lift it up, and remember, this piece has to go on something that's safe for paint to go on. Please make sure not to put that on your dining room table. That would be bad. It would be permanently marked. And you might call it art, but I don't know that the people that you live with would. Right, okay, so you can see there, even these 2 reds were a little bit different. This was a brighter red, this was a darker red, and you can see how that changes, or how the differences in their color. All right, now this one's orange, so I'm putting this orange over my red, and there we go, that color has released from the bleeding tissue paper, and then I'm going to pick it up. And beware, your fingers will get painty as you pick that up. All right, so now I have a little bit of orange in my red, which I love. Okay, now I think I am ready to go back into this red here in the center. I will be very careful as I get close to that black, because as you can see, it is not quite dry. I would recommend you waiting until it dries before you do yours. I think you'll be happier, just so it doesn't accidentally mix. Black is a great color to use in art. I love it. It makes things pop, but it is also one that you want to be very careful with. I think it's good to have a healthy respect for black in art, because it is definitely overpowering, or it can be overpowering if it gets away from you. Okay, so there we go. I've got now a couple poppy petals right there, beautifully painted. I don't know why I scrubbed my brush there. I obviously didn't need to. I'm just coming back with the same red, so that's okay. All right. Isn't it fun to add color to a white piece of paper? And the thing about these Georgia O'Keeffe paintings is that you're like really taking away all of the white, almost all. You can see here there's a little bit, and here there's a little bit, but it is so fun to be able to add so much color and take away so much white. There's a place for white, there absolutely is, but the world is filled with color, and I love filling it even more with color. Okay, so now we're done with those. So last time, I'm going back to this bleeding tissue paper, and I am going to actually just use 2 this time. I'll put a red right there, and then let me see if I can quickly find an orange. Yep, I can. And I'm going to put an orange right there. You know what? You could even, on the oranges especially, but even on the red, you could even use some yellow. That would lighten it up a little bit and give you a whole new color combination. All right, there's my orange. The one thing that I should say about these bleeding tissue paper pieces is that you don't want them to dry on your piece unless you want a square on your piece. If it dries on your paper, then you are going to end up with the square just stuck to your paper. So if you want that look, go for it. If you don't, you want to make sure to take them off when they're wet. All right, there we go. Now I have my red. I'm going to take that off. I'll just smear it around just a little bit. And I would say we are pretty close to finished with this. What do you think? Does it look like Georgia O'Keeffe's poppies? All right, the last step that we have here is to take a clean, wet brush. You can use the water that you've been using, that's okay, but you don't want any paint on your brush, and you are just going to go over all of the lines, just kind of smushing the color together. You can go over the outside line too. That just kind of, makes a gentler impression, a more gentle impression. I don't know if gentler is a word. All right, I think I have done that for most of these now. I've kind of lost track, Yes, I have. You can start to kind of see the outline as time goes on. Okay, so now I'm going to go over these middle ones, the red next to the black, and I have put my brush in the water, and then I have really, really scraped it off on the side, and then I'm just going to go right around here. If you start to see your brush get super black, make sure to put it in the water, and then dry it off again just like I did. Not completely, but just dry it off pretty well on the side of the dish. All right, there we go. Look at that. There is my Georgia O'Keeffe poppy. I would love to see your Georgia O'Keeffe poppies. Please ask an adult to put those on our Facebook site. I just can't wait. Well, I hope that you have enjoyed this lesson. I hope you've enjoyed learning about Georgia O'Keeffe and making your own beautiful, huge poppies. If you like what you're seeing here, please make sure to follow along with us on our YouTube channel right here, and then also on Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest as well. Thank you so much for joining me for this Masterpiece Monday. Thanks for kidding around with me. I will see you next time.